Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am Mr. Forest. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I have a conversation with the Ancestors Project. The Ancestors Project, this will be two people. I don't usually have a trifecta, as it were, three of us on the show, but this is Charlotte, Andrea, and myself. And they head up the Ancestors Project, which they say on their website that they integrate ancestral sacred earth medicine wisdom into the modern journey's experience to reduce harm and expand consciousness. So they do online and in-person opportunities for learning that support radical self-transformation in the name of collective liberation. So lots of crossover there and lots of things that are important to talk about. And I really valued our conversation that we got to have, and I'm sure you will too. But first, a couple things that you might want to know about. We have a big tour coming up, November 1st through 20th. It's called the U.S. West Tour. It's a ceremony tour. Various markets from the mountain states all the way up to Vancouver, BC, all the way down to Southern California, and ending all the way over in Austin, Texas. I encourage you to see if this is something you can come to, or you know who should be there for these intimate events. Tickets are at eastforest.org/tour. And we have so many things we're doing to prepare for this thing and get it on the road, which is exciting because we're doing our best to make it the best thing we can make. And it's by far the widest and biggest ceremony event tour, extended tour we've ever done. So send me good vibes, and thank you so much for helping get the word out. And I look forward to seeing you there if you're able to make it. And as far as Europe is concerned, I mean, man, we really hope to be coming back in 2023. I'm sorry that we had to reschedule those dates, or cancel them, I should say, and then we'll hopefully book new ones. It's a huge puzzle trying to get these things together, let alone doing it overseas. And those dates had to shift, which is regrettable. But I just want to say thank you to all of our fans over in Europe, our community, because it means the world to me that you did buy tickets, and it breaks my heart that we're not able to make them happen in November. But I do look forward to seeing you when we can make that happen in 2023. Aside from that tour, we have a few other things happening, some virtual things. Journey Space does bi-monthly integration circles, but we also have another one of our group journeys on October 22nd. This will feature new music by me that is unreleased that I made specifically to guide journeys. This is the cutting edge of that work. Check it out, journeyspace.com. See if you want to sign up. You know, you can also use Journey Space to make your own circle that we can help facilitate, or work one-on-one with us. We also do coaching stuff one-on-one. And then as far as the East Forest Council, that is my Patreon, patreon.com/East Forest. On October 28th, it's a Friday of this month, that'll be our next council member gathering. So that's like a certain tier of the Patreon. I offer a live Zoom together where we gather and we get to chat, and we also do a live music meditation. And then I often share those meditations with them, so they have sort of like a little bank of them rolling up, and they're custom made in the moment to reflect whatever's going on with us as a group. And they're really cool. It's really fun. And I always find the gatherings really meaningful. But, you know, we had a couple new signups. I want to say thanks to Mary, Kate, and Jay, who signed up as Council Scouts. That's one of the tiers, shall we say, below the member level, but still very valuable. And I get to share the Headwaters album over there if you want to hear that. Not on the Calm app. I shared it on the Council. I share lots of demos and stuff I'm working on. So thank you to them for signing up, and everyone else on the Council. Thank you for supporting this podcast in that way. And the easiest way, if you don't want to spend any coin, which I get it, is to review the podcast on Spotify or Apple, or share it and help get the word out so I can get guests that you like to hear, and that I get sort of some kind of feedback that you are listening and I should keep doing this thing. So thank you. You can always say hi at info@eastforest.org. And yeah, little life update. I came down to Boulder, Utah, southern Utah here, to do two things. one, rehearse for the tour. I set up my whole little live setup with the piano here in the studio, and been doing that. And also to finish mixing my next studio album, which I'm going to tell you more about soon and start sharing stuff with you. It's probably going to come out, we hope, beginning of the year, but I'm really, really excited about it. It's a little different and some of the best music I feel like I've ever written, definitely pushing a lot of boundaries for me and just trying new things. But so it's been really dry here for years, like droughts, and it's been concerning, right? We're kind of up on a mountain, Boulder Mountain, and then that cascades down. It's called the Grand Staircase, all the way to the Grand Canyon, essentially. So it's about 7,000 feet where I'm at. And we've had these hailstorms coming through that are crazy, like biblical hail. You know, you might think, oh, this is once in a 100-year storm, and we'll have 3 in 3 days. And one of these hailstorms, it destroyed many things at the little tiny house, as I call it. It's a trailer. It's a mobile home, but I call it a tiny house for the hipster allure. I had the Starlink internet out there. I've had that for a few months. I love it, except now it's dead because the hail broke it. The hail shattered most of the things on my roof. There's like those little AC covers that cover like an AC unit, you know, on an RV, completely shattered. It looks like bullet holes are in it. And like it even like there's a clothesline with clothespins, like wooden clothespins. It shattered the clothespins. It just, part of you when these things happen, you're just demoralized. It's sort of like, man, what can a guy do? You're always fixing something. It's like a boat that's sinking that I'm always patching up. And the other part, frankly, it's quite humbling because, you know, this is Mother Nature. And I'm thinking about what's going on out in Florida. And this is what I'm going through is nothing compared. You know, Rada's got a bunch of brothers. That's right. A bunch of brothers in Florida. And one of them lives on a boat. And they sent us pictures. His boat broke in half. There's no boat. You know, and that's his home. So that's just, you know, one of the many things going on in our lives these days is extreme weather conditions, and it's just a wild situation. So I don't have any internet anymore. I have to come over to the studio to try and hack that together, and I have to spend the next couple weeks, in addition to rehearsing and doing some mixing, repairing my sinking ship tiny house. So I gotta order a bunch of stuff. That's a whole other ball of wax, trying to get supplies of like if you're working on a project and you forget like a screw and you don't have it, you're either driving 4 hours round trip to a Home Depot or you're ordering on Amazon, and now you have to like wait like a week for that. So it's a special level of preparation that it takes, but this is what we do, right? We keep walking, we keep doing our thing. So that's the update from the beautiful fall. And this is my favorite month, I have to admit. I do love October, but it's not normal that we're having these sorts of monsoons. I also went up on the mountain and enjoyed some of the beautiful aspen colors. Been working on the documentary, doing some shooting up there. More on that. I know, a lot of things. But let's, for now, put some things aside, or while you all are multitasking in your lives, whatever you're doing right now, let's get into this beautiful conversation with our new friends, the Ancestor Project. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and coming on the show. How are you both doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, just came back from Burning Man, so
that's what I hear. Like last night.
Amazing. The integration process coming back into the whatever this side of the world is a little challenging, but because everyone was so loving and gentle, now I'm back in this world, so it's a little
you probably still have a little playa dust behind the ears or something.
Oh, man.
Definitely in the lungs.
You had the burner uniform, had to get the dusty boots.
You took a flight, right? You had to fly home?
I did. I got in 2:00 this morning.
Wow. And you had a good experience? I heard it was particularly hot and dusty, but as it is always.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because I think the word I've never used the word amazing so many times. I probably said that 1,000 times.
Was it your first time?
First time.
Oh,
This
okay.
is even like the harshness, like the dust storm. I got lost a couple of times. I had to talk. I had to do a talk, and I had to go across the playa, which is usually like a 20-minute bike ride. It took me like an hour to get there because I literally couldn't see in front of my face. And so what I thought I was riding in a straight line, but I was
Yeah,
actually
forget about
in a
it.
circle.
Yeah, you got to use that man as your lighthouse
I
to
couldn't see
just.
him.
Oh, you're
So
done.
couldn't
You're
see
done.
him.
You need a compass. Yeah. Gotta keep that in your bug out bag.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, welcome back. So going to something like that, I haven't been since 2012, and so
Mm-hmm.
now that's been quite a while. Um, it's grown and it's become, I'm sure it's evolved and changed, and people lament like how it was in the past versus how it is now. But I'm sure there's still lots of wildness and craziness and abandon out there. Uh, you're still processing it. You haven't even been back 24 hours, but we'll get into sort of the work y'all are doing. But did it change anything about your perception about what you're up to or moving forward?
Yeah, you know what? A couple of things that jumped out at me really. The first one's that if you're at Burning Man, you belong, right? Uh, the second one is it gave me a tremendous amount of excitement about our species. Because when you have 60 to 80,000 people all gathered within 2 weeks, make the third largest city in Nevada, not one speck of trash. I didn't have one negative interaction. And every day I hung out with a completely different group of people, most of them who I'd never met before. It was just lovely. Everybody was gifting, and it just, so I was like, oh, this absolutely can be done, right? We can get to a place of collective liberation. And this is a great example of it. Yeah, I'm lifelong burner. Actually, my daughter will have to go to Burning Man because when I transition, I'm going to have some requirement in my whatever celebration of my life is that she goes to the temple and
Mm.
that leaves a memory to be burned for me. So she's getting them no matter what.
Charlotte, have you been there? Have you been to
I
Burning
have
Man yet?
not. It's interesting because my initial path into psychedelics, sacred earth medicine was in a rave and burner scene. My college roommate was a burner, and we had like soot marks all over the walls and the ceilings of our apartment because she was practicing spinning whatever toy of the week she had. Incredibly talented spinner. She's done like flowed in the conclave in the main
Uh-huh.
around the Burning Man while the
Yeah.
temple was burning. But yeah, I haven't made it out. And then this year it was on the table, and there's just so many other things going on that I was like, I can't dedicate the energy that I would like to be present in that place for this amount of time. So this was not my year. Though interestingly, this past weekend I was out in Sonoma with a group of over 20 Black leaders in the sacred medicine space. And I also have felt coming back from that, like I had to integrate because it was like going to this utopic place of like melanated magic. And we were dancing and talking about the ancestors together and in Sonoma, California, and then had to get dropped back into this reality, this realm. So we're both integrating.
Yeah. And y'all are in Baltimore right now, right? Yeah. Well, maybe it'd be good just to work backwards and you could tell each of your own personal story. I'm curious how you got into this space of psychedelic interest. For each of us, it is such a personal story usually. And I just want to connect the dots a little bit about like how you ended up here, starting the Ancestors Project, the interests that you have, the work that you're doing together. And then we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of ancestral breadcrumbs that bring us to this current moment and place. I think what's funny is the conversation that we were just having. I put this like 2 and 2 together that both of our our gateways was cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe cannabis is a little
It's
bit
the gateway
gateway.
drug, as they say.
As they
Yeah.
say, a gateway to healing, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family where cannabis was talked about openly. We had a really deep connection to nature as a family and spent a lot of time in the outdoors. I also have my dad is from Jamaica, so there was conversation around like bush medicine and folk medicine and healing, and there were, you know, a lot of birth workers in our family, and my mom's a horticulturalist, so that was just sort of embedded. Being in relationship with nature was embedded in my life early on, and talking about medicine. So when the opportunity came to me to smoke cannabis for the first time in my teens, I like jumped on that, and I really think that that helped me maintain a really open mind, so that when I was in college and invited to a rave where I could, you know, partake in MDMA, I was like, I'm down for that. I like to dance. I like to have a good time. And it's really just been, you know, the ancestral comet since then. At the same time that I was starting my own path, and I think at that time I would have called it experimentation, I was also working in harm reduction in Baltimore on needle exchange vans and doing Narcan trainings, and I was studying anthropology. So I was like immersed in drug policy and drug culture. I was having my own experiences in expanded states, and I was studying indigeneity and medicine work from an anthropological and academic viewpoint. And yeah, that just led, you know, MDMA led to LSD, that led to mushrooms. And then eventually Dre and I met when I came and sat in combo ceremony. And that's really when my journey shifted from like the social and celebratory and kind of experimental into the intentional and ceremonial relationship building with these allies.
Yeah.
That is a powerful shift for a lot of people. That shift from the why they're working with these medicines and that element of ritual and ceremony, and how it can kind of open up so many doorways.
Yeah.
That they were mostly, you hear people say, "I had no idea. Like I've been doing this for a decade, and I didn't know that if I just gave it more space to speak, there was a lot to hear."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We were just having a conversation about set and setting, and you know, a rave is fun, but when there's like music blaring and 500 other people's energies and you're in a dark, sweaty, dank warehouse basement somewhere, like you get a different vibe from the medicine.
Yeah.
What about you, Dre?
So when I was probably around the age of like 11, 10 or 11, I was in the woods. I lived in the projects.
In Baltimore or
No, New York.
New York?
New York, Long Island, in fact. And so my mother hates me saying projects, but it was a government housing
It
unit.
is what it is.
And I was like in these woods, which really weren't woods. It was basically like a stand of trees, and I had like this makeshift like bow and arrow, and I was by myself, and for some reason I asked myself, well, what do you want? What are three things that you want to do when you become an adult? And I said, I want to be enlightened. I want to be a great father, fantastic father, and I want to be a good husband. And my joke is, I'm doing a pretty good job at the fathering. Well, we'll ask Olivia. She'll let you know. She'll ultimately tell me whether or not I'm doing a good job. And then enlightenment, I think I'm doing a pretty good job. The being a good husband, that's a little tricky business right there. But
Well,
I'm doing well.
you know, the old saying is like, you think you're enlightened, spend a weekend with your family, or I mean, it's the crucible for the soul's work. Is our relationships, and
that's great.
the most close relationship typically is your partner or your kids.
Yeah.
So it's really where the real work's happening. So no shame in feeling like it's the front line. And moreover, of course, it would be difficult. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
Or not difficult, but there'd be a lot there to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. And well, and then how did that then take you
Oh,
into finding your way to the psychedelic
oh
space?
yeah. So
Was it the enlightenment piece or?
so I was like, I've been practicing martial arts since probably the age of 13, doing lots of meditation, yoga, those things, mindfulness practices. But I found myself at the age of 40, like 92 pounds heavier than I wanted to be, and kind of miserable, depressed, working about 80 hours a week, really focused on making money. And my partner at the time said that she wanted to have a child, and I wanted to have one too. But I recognized that if I didn't address some of this shadow that I had, that I was going to fuck this kid up, right? And you know, this kid would be in a cheer, right? Talking to a therapist about the things that I projected on to them. Funny enough, she still will be in a chair talking about me. Recently, she told me, well, Dad, you you I said to her, I said, "Look, one of my goals has always been not to be the cause of you crying, right?" And she says, well, yeah, but that's because you've done that. I have such a thin skin. Like, okay. And and that's why I cry all the time. I was like, well, I don't really think you cry all the time, but
It's always
okay.
something. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
All right, and so
Oh,
that the martial
I
arts
keep
led
forgetting
you.
it. I keep forgetting
Yeah, but
I
there
love
was
the
okay, so then
vulnerability.
I can tell this at this point.
So then, so here I am at 40 and I'm about to have this kid and I'm like miserable. And I'm like, I want to be a fantastic father. I can't be a fantastic father if I don't love myself. And so I had my first experience with cannabis. I had like a cannabis edible, some pot brownies that someone
At
had.
age 40 was your first experience
Yeah,
growing up in New York. Okay.
I was a total nerd. Like, just say no to
Straight up.
drugs, all drugs. Like, although when I was in the military, I took a lot of ibuprofen and all the kind of stuff that were okay for me to do in the military. And I'm like, I got to do something different. So I had all these people were talking about cannabis and willing to go to jail for cannabis. So I said, well, let me try this out. It can't be that bad, right? And in 90 minutes, I had this incredible experience. I was in love again with myself and everyone else. And then I was like questioning, well, wait a minute, if the government lied to me about this, what else did they lie to me about? And then I got into cannabis reform. But that same year, there was a Father's Day coming up. And I said, I said, well, let me do mushrooms. Let me try mushrooms. And I had a mushroom experience, and it was beautiful. I laughed the entire time, but in that experience, there was this green goddess that appeared, and she says, "You need to go see Grandma." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what that means," but I told my partner, and she was a teacher at an herbal medicine institute, and one of her students was training to be a curandera, and she says, "I work with this medicine. We call her Grandma." So she and I both knew about synchronicity, and she came back. She's like, "You're never gonna believe this. There's this grandma ceremony, it's ayahuasca, blah blah blah." So a week later, I'm in my first ayahuasca ceremony.
A week later. Wow.
Week later, and the first 4 hours was oof. I got my ass kicked because for one thing, I had decided that people who purge were purging because they had some major issues. Like that wasn't me. I was just there to become enlightened. I didn't have a lot of work to do. I'm already there. And so my ego was huge, and I suffered because I was resistant to the medicine, resistant to this idea of purging. And about 4.5 hours into the ceremony, I was exhausted, and I was like, I just want to die. This really sucks. I'm violating the law, blah, 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 blah. It's a Schedule 1 substance. I'll never get all this judgment, just like for hours, just swirling. Like, why would you do something that's so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And then I heard someone across the room purge. And immediately when they purged, I said, it's going to be okay. I said like a little prayer. It's going to be okay, sister. And it just snapped. It just immediately switched. And I was in this deep love and compassion for myself and for every being, every vital energy around me, and that lasted for like another 8 hours. And I was in this just tremendous bliss. I had a rebirth experience, my first ceremony, which is highly unusual for people to have that experience. So if you're listening, don't expect your first ceremony to have a rebirth experience. And then about a week and a half later, I was in Peru doing my first dieta, and I haven't looked back since then. This has been my calling, and and my focus. And back then my ego was like, you're going to serve medicine one day and tell everyone about it. But I was smart enough to know that, man, probably not, maybe not. Maybe I'll never serve medicine to anyone, because, my teachers would tell me you could apprentice for the rest of your life and still never be ready to serve medicine. And so that was sobering, but also like I saw the results within a year. I lost all that weight. I went from, if you came to my house before then, East, I would have done a background check on you, right? I would have asked you, well, like, who is this human being? Now it was like, strangers come to my house, I'm giving you a big hug and a kiss, and I love you, and amazing. So I went from this very afraid person working all these hours for money to like getting rid of some businesses that I felt like were not ethical for me anymore. And then I went from focusing on money to like money was no longer a concern for me. Like I was more concerned with like doing things that were integrity with love and connection and supporting other human beings. Yeah.
Nice. Oh, there we go. We got it. That was we connected the connector. Perfect. Okay, well that helps a lot from both of you. So how did you come together to create the Ancestors? Is it Ancestor Project or Ancestors?
The Ancestor Project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what is it? What are you guys up to? And how did this come to be? And then I'm sure we'll get into some stuff from there.
So I was in a brothel in France, and no, I'm just joking. You go first.
Yeah, I was working in a co-working space, and somebody came in with combo marks, and it's something that I had seen on National Geographic when I was in high school and a little anthropology nerd. And so I asked them, I made some flippant remark because I had just started to do some reading around the intersection of race and psychedelics. And I made a flippant remark that they probably went to some white shaman. And they're like, no, it's this guy named Dre here in Baltimore, and I can connect you. And they gave him my number, me his, I don't know. Somehow we ended up on the phone and had this initial conversation and decided from there to meet up in person. And then I decided to sit in ceremony, in combo ceremony. So really our first like relationship building, the foundation of the Ancestor Project and our friendship and our medicine family is being in ceremony together.
Yeah.
And from there, the doors really just blew wide open. We saw this immense need within our community for more BIPOC-centered spaces to do integration and process our journeys. We also saw the immense need for education in BIPOC communities about the real origins of these medicines and their purpose and their role in our healing, in our collective liberation. And so we started super locally in Baltimore and planned out a bunch of events, and then the pandemic hit, and
thank you, pandemic.
we had to put everything online and started with BIPOC integration circles. And the Comet ride started a little bit there, and then George Floyd was murdered, and there was this, really massive national shift in focus to the importance of, diversity, inclusion, equity, the corporate strategy of it, but also just like the importance of centering the stories and experiences of Black Americans, Brown Americans, Indigenous folks. And then all of these eyes turned onto the the Ancestor Project, and the Comet just like massively took off from there.
Mm-hmm.
And now we exist as both an online and an in-person community where folks can go for education, ceremony, and integration work that is rooted in ancestral practice and leans on ancestral practice as a form of harm reduction for modern journeyers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And could you define ancestral practices just so we can kind of focus in on what that means?
Yeah, for us, it is the modalities and practices and technologies that surround entheogenic shamanism, the practice of entheogenic shamanism, and of looking at the ways that our ancestors engaged with ritual and with sacred earth medicines to support the well-being of the community and the harmony between human beings and the earth that we are a part of and live on.
Okay.
Yeah. And then for me, I was in the cannabis industry, and I had left about 3 days before we had a conversation. I had left the industry. I was kind of brokenhearted. I thought cannabis was going to be the tool that I was going to be a part of to usher in a new way of thinking about these master plants. I had been practicing shamanism, but it was not, it was like my side gig. It's the thing I was doing in the shadows. And then when I left, I was walking down the street and I was just like, what are you going to do with your life? You got a kid in school, and what are you going to do to support your family? And then I remembered like this advice I give people all the time in ceremony, which is to do the thing that makes your heart sing. Forget about the money, all that will come.
Forget about capitalism.
Right, forget about it. Just do the thing. So I was like, okay, universe, I don't know how that's going to support a private school education, but okay, let's go for it. So once I surrendered to that, 3 days later, we get in connection with each other. We have this amazing conversation. And since then, it's been like kind of like a blur for me. It's just been like riding this wave, and the universe has just, provided for this, given us this privilege, this great privilege to be able to share the wisdom of our ancestors, spirit guides, and allies. And it's just, I feel like, the lesson, there's so many lessons in that, but the greatest is it's the same in ceremony. You set an intention, but let go of the expectation. So my intention was to do the thing that made my heart sing. I thought it was like I'd be just serving medicine all over the world, and that would be my primary focus. But really, it was Ancestor Project, right? It was creating a training and education platform for folks to really support preparing for ceremony, right? Understanding what that means and how to prepare, seeing it as a ceremony, not as like a recreational activity, although there's time for that as well, but also the integration, because what I was seeing was lots of people using this as a crutch, like the magic pill to fix them, right? But you have to attract that healing into yourself. You have to heal your own inner healer and humble yourself to these wise ancestors who are, thousands of years wiser and older than our species. So for me, that was kind of my story.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So when we talk about some of these ancestral rituals, Charlotte, you mentioned that you're finding like you could bringing those into ceremony today. What are some of those that you're finding are the most practical or useful? Or what's like the missing ones that people are like, well, if you've probably found over time, sort of like the basic constituent parts. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's interesting. Like the elements of ceremony.
I mean, from your perspective, of this process.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because frequently what we see currently in this space is a lot of young people leading the conversation, which is important that we have this reclamation of tradition. And it's also really important that we're guided in that by elders and by lineage. And so sometimes what you'll see is people who travel somewhere and sit in ceremony one time and then come back and want to like try to replicate that or put themselves in a position of leadership or and not really honor the container that the medicine is held in or the container that that technology is held in. And so our approach is really to root in what our ancestors have always done, which is to create a container that you start with some type of invocation or prayer, calling in the ancestors, the spirit guides, the allies, the relatives that you need for support in that healing work. It's about having a space that is maintained well, like energetically, whether that's through, there's different ways of cleaning a space, but being engaged in that practice and then being really just open to what spirit wants to do in that place. When you get into the nitty gritty of like what technologies are being used, what tools, and when I say technology, I'm not talking about like modern technology in a computer. I'm talking about the technologies of the medicine, of sound, frequency, touch, somatic release, like all these different pieces. When you start to connect the dots, these are elements of ritual that are found across the globe throughout different traditions. And it's really about, doing your own lineage work to reconnect and learn about what the tools were that your ancestors used. And then also going, as Dre said, and like humbling yourself in front of these other teachers who have been steeped in these traditions their entire lives to learn how to work with these technologies to support modern journeyers. I feel like a really good book on this topic that I'm reading and am constantly suggesting is The Healing Wisdom of Africa by Malidoma Somaye, because he talks specifically about how we bridge the gap between the westernized world and what I would refer to as the global south, or the westernized world and indigenous culture and ways of being, and talks a lot about like how we can lean on elders, right? Our society is very like aging averse, as opposed to seeing elders as, holders of deep wisdom. So like how to be in relationship with elders, how to be in relationship with mentors, how to create ritual that is specific to the needs of your community in this moment, in this time, with this specific problem. And so, yeah, I feel like that's he talks about the different technology that elements bring forth and sound and different plants or herbs and divination, all these different tools that have been used for millennia to maintain our balance with each other and our harmony with the natural world.
Yeah. And I would add to that, if pro tips, so to speak, two that have really been powerful for us is intention. Like approach it now. So we view what we're doing as living a life of ceremony. Like everything is ceremony for us. Like our goal is to live, when you come to ceremony, you come to ceremony with lots of respect and gentleness and thoughtfulness. And not actually not so much thoughtfulness, but beingness, like being present and surrendering, actually turning off the logical, intellectualizing mind and really be in a place of like presence. Right. I think it's a powerful tool. And then, have the intention, but let go of the expectations, right? Is a powerful tool, but also altar. I think, you can call it meditation practice, but I think one of the most valuable tools that we've been sharing with people is to build an altar. And this specific altar I'm speaking of is an altar where you go to worship yourself. The first thing you do in the morning is you get up and you sit there, and your spirit guides and ancestors and allies, in some traditions, you're there to help them. But the tradition I'm sharing is they're there to help you. They've they've already figured it out. They're good. So what they need is you. They're here to help you because you're the baby here and don't know anything. And so sitting at your altar every morning of worship of yourself and veneration of yourself is a really powerful ritual, and to get you into this place of gentleness and respect, and hear the name that you chose before your parents were born.
Well, I just think about, you said your first journey, and the flip for you happened essentially when it became the attention going from you to another, to an act of like service and compassion, and that unlocked everything. And in some ways, an altar is a vector point of something larger than yourself to speak through your attention, and that again is something othering than just your mind. And that is a powerful tool. When you talk about ritual that's specific for your community or for yourself or for these times, how do you think people can think that way and sort of develop? Because I think it's a very interesting point about developing mechanisms of ceremony and ritual that work for us, and we create tools that we want to use for ourselves or for our communities. But I don't think it's maybe that complicated, but at the same time, people are probably like, what would I do?
Yeah, that's what he talks about in the book, that like it is not that complicated. And also talking about, you weren't at the last practitioner circle we had, but we talked about the differentials between what is ceremony and what is ritual. And he talks about ceremony being something that's very replicable, right? You go to a wedding ceremony in a church where, let's say, people are not writing their own vows. It's going to be the same ceremony every single time. They're going to say the same things. The procession's going to be the same. Versus ritual is something where you are opening up the space to allow for spirit to come in and work in the way that spirit needs to work. And so I think, again, like, the ritual of going to your altar every day becomes that, right? And as you develop that practice, your curiosity begins to get sparked, and you think about, what other tools are calling to you, what other modalities, what curiosities do you have. But just going to the same place and lighting a candle each day and sitting for a moment to be connected to your breath and to yourself allows you to start to build this connection to spirit, who will then guide you in how ritual needs to be developed.
Truth.
I don't think there's not like a step 1, 2, 3 to your first ritual. So
It's not a Mashable. There's not some Medium article.
Yeah,
Top
exactly. There's no
7
TikTok
techniques.
video where I'm dancing and like pointing and then the one, and then, it's not that. It's really taking the time to develop a relationship with your inner teacher, who will then, and your inner spirit and, source energy, and listening into that to see how you're being guided to create different rituals.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's beautiful. Well, what do you think in the psychedelic, whatever you want to call it, wave that's happening right now, are some of the edges of it, like the spear tips that where is the most poignant work that's happening? Some might say, for instance, it's access. Or some might say it's something else. But from your experience on the ground level and the work you're doing, what do you think needs to be done, and what's emerging?
Well, I feel like access is important. Like all of us need access, or should have access to these medicines if we choose. And so, like, looking at how do we provide access for all different people's for different experiences. I think looking at our approach. We use words like set and setting, but the set and setting should be one of ceremony, like a place where you're setting intention and you're there to listen to your elders who, when you think about even something like, our newer, what we perceive to be our newest relationships with like LSD and MDMA. MDMA is sassafras, right? Tree, honor and venerate that. And then LSD is ergot, right? and see it as a relationship you're building, not a transactional, like I have a pathology and so this thing is going to fix me. See of it more like a respectful relationship with an elder, right? And why do I call them elders? Well, we know that all plants are at least 65 million years older than our species, right? So clearly they've been here a lot longer and have a lot more wisdom to share about how to live effectively on this planet and how to live in harmony with each other on this planet. So really get into a place of understanding that you really don't know as much as you think you do, and stop trying to recreate what's already been written, right? Like you see this conversation about folks discovering something, or now the inner healer intelligence, right? This is shamanism, right? That they're talking about. They're trying to repackage it into something new and exciting, and it'd also be helpful if those who actually have the greatest experience with expanded states of consciousness are the ones leading the conversation, right? I get scientists are really impressed by the science, right? But, shamanism is a 40,000-year-old tradition, probably our oldest tradition. And they have vast lineages and knowledges and deep relationship with all these vital forces. So, let's listen to what they have to say about how do we approach these medicines instead of trying to pretend that there's no awareness and we're going to rediscover it and repackage it and give it a new name. I think would be really helpful for us.
Yeah, people have made a lot of money off of repackaging old ideas.
It's called colonization.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, some of it's been done by the yoga, for instance.
Yeah.
You look at what's his name, the guy who did the hot yoga.
Bikram.
Yeah, I mean, he's Indian, but it's like he in a sense he capitalized, on a tradition or
because the conversation that is frequently not being had is the ways in which oppression and colonization are internalized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So just because we often say just because you skin folk don't mean you kin folk. Just because you're a brown person or a black person doesn't mean that you are not colonized. We're the ones in closest relationship to the ongoing process of colonization. And what I was going to say in response to that last question was I feel like the conversations around access and reciprocity are intersecting a lot right now. And our access, reciprocity, and conservation as well as we get into this place of seeing these medicines become increasingly mainstreamed, that, we're seeing a lot of folks left out of the conversation. Then there are conversations around access in regards to the medical model or clinical setting that really disregard the long, long history of mistrust that BIPOC folks have in medical institutions because of the long history of experimentation that was done in our communities.
That's real. Yeah.
Then there's the reciprocity piece that there have been, it is a truth that there have been communities that have been protecting these medicine ways for many, many years through, intense and violent oppression. And so how are we making sure that those communities are taken care of as the West capitalizes on these medicine ways? And then similarly, the conservation piece, how are we ensuring that maybe there is a way to, there are certainly spirit molecules, right? And there could be ways that modern science really helps in the conservation of these medicines, and that needs to be done in a way that centers reciprocity, access, and really just isn't based in erasure. We just see so much in the psychedelic space that there is just a full erasure of the reality of indigenous folks having protected these medicines, and these concepts that are showing up in psychedelic assisted therapist training programs that are really just based in entheogenic shamanism without giving credit or speaking directly to that. So yeah, I feel like access
Well, beyond giving
reciprocity and
credit,
compassion.
do you think it's also sort of asking them to have a seat at the table in
Hmm.
influencing the work? Because I think in for Oregon, for instance, that I don't know for sure, but I think that's part of like their program was like they're trying to mash some of these things together, and who knows how that's going to pan out in the next 6 months.
Well, we
Wee!
both were on the equity
Subcommittee, and it
subcommittee.
wasn't great.
Yeah, and they gave us this whole spiel that, like, what we the recommendations we make are going to be and then we had oversight over the entire program, and then majority of the recommendations we made, the default response was, "Oh, we don't have a budget to
Uh-huh.
address any of those things." And I remember one of the first big conversations we had was around this idea that if someone was a psychotherapist, that they should not have to go through a training program, that they already have the skills, which is ridiculous. For what
I see.
we know that many psychotherapists have never even used the medicines that they're prescribing or encouraging people to use. They
Right.
certainly don't have this is a general statement, but the majority of psychotherapists have never supported someone in an expanded state of consciousness, right? And then this idea that the person who has this license or the certificate is the person who should be the lead on a psychedelic assisted therapy model. Completely ridiculous. But the shaman or the underground therapist who, you know, has supported thousands of human beings in an expanded state of consciousness, they should be at best a number two, and certainly should not be supporting someone unless they have the support of the primary, which is some person.
I feel you. Think about like being even like the president of the United States. It's like maybe that job you should have to go to ayahuasca,
Oh,
as Graham Hancock said, a dozen times. Like that's just part of the you got to be 40. You got to go to ayahuasca. Like the fact that you don't even need a fitness test of mental capacity to be the president. So let alone to be like. As we know, when you're in these expanded states of consciousness, it's one of the most vulnerable states you can be in emotionally and physically, for that matter. You're completely
All of it.
helpless. And so not to have someone who even has an inkling of what's going on the other side, because you can't, if you've never done that, all you see is someone kind of writhing around. You have no idea.
Right.
You have no idea what's going on. And all the normal tools might be useful later, I suppose, but
Right.
like in that moment, it's less is more, frankly. And
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and the fact that that was even, I remember there was like, you know how there's waves of topics in the news, and like there was a wave
Yeah.
of this question: do psychedelic assisted therapists need to have had an experience in expanded state of consciousness? And I was like, why are we even
having
talking
that
about
conversation?
this?
Of course,
This isn't a question, you know, but like it's something that's very common in the ketamine space, I know, and I've had very little relationship building time with that medicine in particular. But the one time I came back and just wrote in my journal, I think I died, and that's okay. If you have never like if you have never been to that place, how could you ever take someone there? And then when these therapists do have their first experience, sometimes after having administered this medicine to many people already, they're like, holy shit, that's
Right.
what I was doing
Yeah.
to people? That's what I was giving them?
exactly.
And you're like,
Yeah.
yes, that's what,
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes then it's really interesting. You see those people then pull back.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're like, oh, I need to not be
Hopefully
doing
it's some humbling.
hopefully,
Yeah. I mean,
you know. But yeah, it's just a wild conversation that never is one that our ancestors certainly never had. Unless you went through a rite of passage, you were not the elder in charge of the rite of passage, right? Or facilitating the rite of passage. So,
and there certainly wasn't a time limit on that either. Like, there wasn't like you take these classes and then
in 120 hours,
and you're ready. It didn't work that way. You could. I remember my teachers told me the first time, you could be apprenticing. I like how long am I going to apprentice? You could be apprenticing for 20 or 30 years and still not be. You may never serve medicine. That's a potential possibility. So are you still interested? I was like, yeah, because I saw the results in my own self, and I was willing to just wipe people's vomit and puke for the rest of my experience. If that's what it is.
The equivalent of sweeping the ashram floor is now cleaning
Yeah.
up puke buckets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could look at this from another perspective as well, in that we are in an emergency, culturally, spiritually, really, but ecologically, financially, et cetera, et cetera. And some would argue it's like all the tools need to be on the table. And one of the beautiful things about psychedelics, particularly mushrooms, let's say, for instance, they grow all over the world. They're just there. And you do have the ability on your own to just pick it up, as it's been done for thousands of years, most likely, and just do your thing. And many people have stumbled into self-healing, self-generated work that is valid too. And so my position is not divergent, but it's this idea that let's provide tools for people. And I think the Ancestor Project is a lot about this, because this is going to happen, is happening, has happened. How do, from a harm reduction point of view, help people not have those traumatic experiences or go left or end up in jail, all the things that can happen from just ignorance. Give them support. Because I think if we're really going to maximize, I know it's a crazy thing to say, but at this time, if we're really going to give the full bandwidth of this opportunity to humanity, it's going to have to come in many shapes and sizes.
Absolutely.
To communities who maybe don't feel included, they need to be included. Affinity groups, different age groups, through the medical system, not through the medical system. And everyone's got the way that's going to work for them. Some of it might be ketamine, some of it might be ayahuasca in the jungle. And so from that perspective, we're going to make some mistakes. But I think it's about support, it feels like, more than anything. Do you agree?
Yeah, 1,000%. One of the first resources that we ever shared with the community is this. It's still up on our site, and you can download it for free. It's questions to ask your facilitator or medicine person, because I agree we're in a time of urgent need in terms of healing. At the same time, spirit doesn't move at the pace that we move. Humans are moving at a pace that I don't even think we were really designed to move at. And what we have seen happen is that people are so ready or so desperate because they've been in a medical model that has not supported them for so many years, there is an urgency to finding the medicine that discernment flies out the window. And this is when people end up in these situations. And this is not to victim blame. There are abuses of power that happen in the medicine space all of the time. And at the same time, when you are better informed, you can, keep an eye out for some of those spiritual red flags when you're choosing the circle that you're going to sit in, the community that you're going to connect with, the medicine teacher that you're going to connect with, and even the type of medicine, right? Because some people will be like, oh, I really felt an affinity to mushrooms, or I've been reading about
Use the word that they like to say.
Called to.
I've been called to. Yeah.
Whatever medicine, but I couldn't find that, but I saw that there's a Bufo circle in town next week, and so since I couldn't get to the thing that my spirit is really calling me to, I'm going to go do this other thing because they've been equated as psychedelics, and right. So I think equipping people with the tools, which is a huge part of our work. Our 3 pillars are education, ceremony, integration. You don't get people to ceremony unless they have the education around how to, how they want to be best supported, all the options that they have available to them. So that's been a huge, and especially in BIPOC communities, to try to break down some of the stigma that has been built around these medicines. Education is super, super necessary so that people are aware of everything that is available to them and the real origins of those options.
Yeah, what's interesting too about this conversation about there's mushrooms all over, or you can just pick one and pop one in your mouth. So a couple of things that I find interesting. So the first is that we look at the history of shamanism, and I'm specifically speaking, well, actually all types of shamans, but specifically entheogenic shamanism, what you find is that the shaman would uh, have these expanded states of consciousness, and then either they were part of a lineage, which would kind of teach them some of the rules of the road, or they did a lot of traveling. They would meet with other indigenous and they would share. Okay, so we use this medicine called tobacco, and this is how we use it. And use this medicine called diahe, and this is how we use it. And so there was a constant exchanging of ideas and educating themselves about this. There wasn't really a lot of I'm going to be someplace by myself. I'm going to pop some mushrooms in my mouth, and then all of a sudden now I'm going to start helping other people in expanding states of consciousness, right? So I think there's this thing. There's this. And I think it's more of a Western conversation because, in the West, a lot of us feel betrayed by our elders, right? Our elders are the ones who are telling us that these medicines are bad. And the government, you certainly a lot of us don't have a lot of trust and respect for our government because, they've lied to us about so many of these things. So I think there needs to be if you want to go out and experiment on yourself, go for it. Go for it. But the minute you start trying to support other people in this experience, it's a huge responsibility. And if your mirror is not clean, you're going to fuck someone up, right? Look, as a psychotherapist, you can be completely, out of the loop, right? And not really connected with your practices and listen to people all day long but not practice what you're preaching. But in shamanism, it doesn't really work that way. If you do that too much, you're definitely going to injure yourself, but you're more than likely going to cause a tremendous amount of harm for those other people that you're supporting.
I've met a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists at ayahuasca circles.
Oh,
They love that work.
Right.
I just did 10 years of therapy in one night for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because they haven't been in therapy for the last 10 years.
Right.
While they took on everybody else's stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Well, to round this out, I just wanted to ask you all if you both feel hopeful. And if so, what are you hopeful about?
I don't think we would do this work if we didn't feel
hopeful. Yeah. So I had an elder, I was learning to serve cacao, and I was in Guatemala at this place called Lake Antillán, which is a really beautiful place. It's a lake that's a dead volcano, and then 3 active volcanoes. The manifestation there is incredible. But around this Lake Antillán, there's all these little towns, and one of them is this town called St. Marcos. And everyone there, at least half the population is gringos, and they own everything. And I was so frustrated by this. I was like, oh, we gotta change this and bring some melanation to this conversation. And the elder smiled at me and he said, do you believe in the prophecies? I'm like, yeah, of course I believe in the prophecies. And he said, well, if you believe in the prophecies, we're in the dispensation of the divine feminine, and all of these systems have already been dismantled, right? So the best that you can do is be a little tiny part, a little helpful part. So instead of focusing on all this anger and we got to change this thing, oh my God, the world's about to end. How about you just be a little bit of sweetness and be about focusing on how you want to be helpful in creating an expansive experience for the rest of us that is gentle, loving, and respectful. You can do that. And it was a big shift for me because, Ancestor Project, we have this huge platform, the BIPOC community. I think we have a responsibility to all of us, but in particular to that community that's been marginalized in this conversation. And it was very easy to get sucked into this conversation about, we got to change this. And it just really shifted my perspective that look, we're thankful, Charlotte and I, for the privilege of having this platform of Ancestor Project. But make no mistake, this was getting done whether we stepped into the conversation or not. The universe, the spirit guides, allies, these medicines that are ancient and much wiser than us have already figured this out and have transmuted this. And if you don't believe me, think about cannabis. It started in 1 or 2 areas of the world, and now it's ubiquitous in our society. People are willing to go to jail to have a relationship with this medicine, right? Well, and that's the thing. Like we have to acknowledge that it is a relationship. But I think these medicines are way wiser than our species, and uh, our elders have already clearly prophesized that this time that we're in is the shift, is the dispensation. So we get excited about what's gonna happen, right? Getting excited about the mystical and the invisible, and you may not logically understand from point 1, 2, and 3 how we're going to get to this place of collective liberation. But I was just in a space. I spent 2 weeks in a freaking desert with a whole bunch of strangers and loved the hell out of each other. So like this is happening. Just be part of it and get excited.
I love it.
There's this phrase in Spanish that more or less translates to we're each an ant and it's our responsibility to carry our piece of sand back to the to build the ant hill. That's why I have my ant tattoo.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's how I feel about it. I still have some hope about the potential of human beings, and I'm just carrying my piece of sand. It happens to be an awesome piece of sand that I really love and really makes my heart sing and all that. But it's a piece of sand like all the other ones. And yeah, so it's really just about each of us uncovering and remembering our role in the collective and in our liberation journey, and then doing that thing, like committing to the vision and doing that thing. And for us, that's the Ancestor Project.
Yeah.
Well, Charlotte and Dre, thank you so much for taking the time. People can find the Ancestor Project where?
You can find us at the Ancestor Project on Instagram and Facebook, and our website is theancestorproject.com.
All right. I'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And I hope to cross paths with you or chat again sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, love your music, by the way.
Yeah, we do. We use
Thank
your
you.
music in ceremony. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte and Drea, for coming on. I enjoyed that. Look forward to crossing paths in the future, and I'm sure and I hope we will. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Provenance, and it is the Keith Sweaty remix. So Keith Sweaty is the electronic producer I worked with on an album called Karen. But actually, like the way we met, he was doing live sound for me in Portland, Oregon for this little show I was doing at the Alberta, what was it called? Alberta Pub House or something. It was just down the street from my house, this little venue. And we connected, and he's like, hey, I'll do a remix for you. And I just had the Held album, and he took the song Provenance and made this glorious remix. And then I took that, and I was like, I'd like to try singing on it. And it's one of the first times I'd done singing sort of like that on electronic music. That's actually what spurred us, was this track, us liking it so much that we're like, let's do a whole album. So I love this track. I'm not sure how many of y'all have heard it, but I think it's amazing. So here it is. And if you want to hear it, it's wherever you listen to music and so forth, if you want to listen to it without me doing the jibber jabber over it. Thank you again to our Patreon, patreon.com/East Forest, our council on Patreon. And thank you for checking out the tour and getting the word out about these tickets. Get one before they're gone, November 1st through 20th in the United States in the West. eastforest.org/tour. All right, you guys keep walking that walk. Watch out for the hail. Whatever else is coming our way, we can do it better because we're going to do it together. You keep walking that walk, don't take any shit. But if you do, you know what to do. You do it with grace.
Stop.